Hello, and welcome to the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism Global Journalism Seminar series. At the start of this year, amongst many other big news events, protests spread throughout Kazakhstan, sparked at the beginning by rising fuel prices. And like the Yellow Vest protests in France and protests in so many parts of the world, this anger over fuel prices was merely a tinder for wider discontent. In Kazakhstan's case, the anger was over state corruption, inequality, and anger over an unequal distribution of the country's natural resources, amongst many other things. The protest started peacefully, but escalated into a violence that was the worst the country had seen in nearly 30 years of independence. Darkhan Umirbekov, a digital editor at Radio Liberty's Kazakh service based in Almaty, joins us today to talk about what's going on. Darkhan was a fellow at the Reuters Institute in the UK at the start of lockdown. It's wonderful to have him back here on Zoom. Darkhan, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Mira. Thank you. Thank you for having me today in this seminar. It's an honor to join you today.
Great, thank you. Can you just start off, Darkhan, by telling us a little bit what happened at the start of this year and whether it was something that caught you unawares in your newsroom?
The first 4 days were holidays in Kazakhstan. And we were at home, not working. But when the protests started in the west of Kazakhstan, so we sent our correspondent to the region. But on the next day, on January 3rd, the protests spread into other regions, including the capital, where I'm based, in Nur Sultan, and it was like a, mass sporadic protests going over different places. And since those days were holidays, it wasn't possible to bring all the reporters to work. And I'm an editor. It's not my usual work to report from the street, but I have to go to streets and report from the protest myself. And that's how I was a part of this protest reporting. And the first day, I'd send you a video. There were just a few people, but the police detained them anyway and blocked me while I was reporting, while I was shooting to my cell phone camera. And then the following days, the protest culminated into violence.
And was this something you'd been anticipating when you went out to cover the protest? I know you said you're an editor, so it's not your day job. But if you had sent journalists out, did you think you were sending them into into a conflict zone?
No, we didn't anticipate, but we were aware that our journalists might be detained, that they might get hurt, because we had that experience in the past. But we were fully prepared, we were our costumes saying that we were journalists, and there were nothing that we could anticipate about the violence. But again, we were in the capital where the situation was more or less calmer. The violent clashes were in cities like Almaty, Shymkent, and Taraz, and etc. The Kazakh service main office is in Almaty, which is Kazakhstan's biggest city. We are in the capital.
Great, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I made that mistake earlier. Overall, about 12,000 people were arrested, and at least 7 journalists were amongst them, and 160 people at least that we know about were killed during these protests, including a TV news worker in Almaty.
Yeah, officially it's 225. Okay. 160 is for Almaty city. Okay. 167, I guess, died in Almaty alone.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the mood in Kazakhstan at the moment? Is it kind of a shock or trying to process what happened?
The mood is the situation is not over. It's continuing with the mass arrests and the tortures in prisons, and people who somehow attended as a peaceful protester, or those who were just injured occasionally while going to pharmacy stores or looking for their relatives. And with millions of reasons they have to go to streets on those days, but they were not protesters. and they were detained as well. And if you were injured on those days, that for the police, that was an evidence that you are just so-called a mobster or terrorist, and that was a reason for the police to detain you, even from the hospital. So
wow.
the situation continues in another form. So that's the kind of mood in Kazakhstan.
And when you went into the protests, what was the mood amongst the people towards journalists? Did they feel you were part of the establishment? Was there hostility, or did they feel that you're there to tell the story?
That's a very interesting question. So RFRL's Kazakh service is among a few media outlets that covers all the protests, even if they are unauthorized from the government. In Kazakhstan, the media outlets they are all controlled or either owned by the government, and they avoid covering the protests. And since we have a reputation of telling the truth, usually we are treated very friendly with the protesters. Treat us very friendly, and in the capital, so they welcomed us, especially me. When I went live on Facebook, they were telling their demands and talking to me, and like they were saying that it's RFRL, just listen to them, or just they were very friendly. But from January 5th to January 6th, when the protests developed into the violent clash in Almaty and Shymkent cities, my colleagues told me that they were harassed and attacked either verbally or physically. They were very hostile to our journalists, and there was a moment in Almaty when some unknown group of men shoot a fire at our correspondents. They barely escaped.
And what do you think caused this hostility? What was the change here?
It's really hard to say now. Like the government, the authorities say that there are three components of the protest. That's first the peaceful protesters, then they were just occasionally mobsters or looters, and then the terrorists. We are not sure, but like they were reluctant to be filmed to our cameras. Perhaps that's one of the reasons. I cannot say of another reason why they did that.
It's just very striking that it's becoming a trend that in these protests the mood changes against journalists, and you don't quite know where the threat comes from, whether it's coming from the authorities or vigilantes or protesters.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know. And people were talking about the provokers or provocateurs. And if that's true, that might be another reason. Like, the provokers from we have no evidence, but there is we have an experience with mass protests going violent. And we have like 1968 event while we were under Soviet Union, and Januzin events in 2011, when many people observed that they were provokers from the authorities who were dressed up as ordinary people, but provoking to fight and to saying very bad words against the leaders of peaceful protests. And the people were saying that the pictures of provokers were seen in Almaty and other cities as well. So we are not sure.
And it's kind of hard to get a sense of how vast Kazakhstan is, so to report on this nationally.
Yeah.
I want to come back to the protest, and particularly your detention, in a moment, but just staying on this issue of the size of the country and how hard it is to get a sense of what's happening. There were also internet blackouts during this period. So talk us through how this affected your work, and how easy was it to get communication from your correspondents around once they returned from their holiday?
That's a very important question. We were paralyzed. We couldn't do anything those days. And we were shocked because we were not prepared to that kind of situation. The internet was blocked in the night of January 5th, and that was a total blackout because there was a state of emergency declared in entire Kazakhstan. But the following days, so we were out of the internet, and we were in the internet information vacuum for a couple of days, and then the authorities went to turning on the internet for a few hours in regions where the situation was more or less calm. So in the capital, the situation was stable, and they gave the internet for a few hours, and so we were in panic how to use those hours effectively. Yeah. So as I said before, our main office is in Almaty, and Almaty suffered from the violence most, and they were out of the internet for the entire period. And they were, but luckily the traditional or conventional phone connection worked when we were calling each other, and all we could do is to just report word by word. We were not able to send our video materials or just audio, just our reporting from the phone connection. And then the following days as well, but the problem was that we didn't know what time and in what period they're going to give the internet. So one day it was like in midnight, one day it was in the morning. So, and first we had to go to the streets and film, and then send. It was heavy files. That was very struggling. But there was another problem. Our office in the capital is close to the presidential palace. We were in a building that's called Journalist House. So we have many our colleagues from other media outlets as well, as like 5-story building, and there was a cordon surrounding the presidential palace, and our office was inside that cordon. And the situation was that the armed soldiers wouldn't let us in to our office, while our colleagues from other outlets didn't have any problem entering their office, but they treat us especially. I mean, the RISJ Kazakh service. And then later we learned that someone from they turned down the internet, but someone from the journalist house had like satellite connection, and they suspected that it was RISJ Kazakh service. But later we learned that that was Russian media outlet, not us.
Okay.
Yeah. But and so, we were not able to use our office. That meant that we couldn't edit our videos. Yeah. So we had to, we had to just shoot the streets, the events to our camera, and then we didn't know how to edit them because all our computers or the laptops were in our office. So there was a double problems. It doubled our problems.
So what did you do in the end?
So we went to each other's house using just very, very ordinary laptops. That was very difficult to work because they would stuck while they were processing heavy video materials. And then we switched to cell phone cameras. We would shoot and send it right away. But our colleagues in Prague, they were under stress as well because they were collecting information from all over the regions, and there were only few correspondents in Prague, and they had to just absorb all the information. It was very challenging to them as well.
Yeah,
so that's why we tried to send them the ready to go video shots, but it was difficult. And then we switched to cell phone movie cuts. We were just shooting videos in short and then sending them.
I mean, what you did under those conditions are incredible, and it's actually good. I'd like to show some of the work you produced and just some of the scenes, because you were arrested, you were detained by police while covering the protests on the third day, I think. Is that right?
The fourth day.
Fourth day. And you,
yeah, it's, if you were counting from the first day of protest, it's third day, but if we count from the first day of New Year, it was on January 4th.
Gotcha. That's, be more precise with the date. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, so it was day off for me. Like, I was at home spending my time with my mother, who came to visit me, and suddenly I got a call from my colleague saying that there was a mass protest going on in my neighborhood, and asked me to go there to report. And I rushed into that place because the day before we were receiving messages that there was a protest in some place, and we were going there, and just to learn that they were all detained. Like, it was a game, you know. You heard something, you go there, you have to just be on time to see what was happening. And I rushed into the place, and first time I went, I was able to report from the protest, but my cell phone was over. It was recharged, and I went back home and charged it. And when I returned to the protest, to the place of protest, it was empty and surrounded by police van. And we were saying, oh, just we were not on time, like we are late. And then we've heard just a noise from the other side of the street, and we run into that place, and there was a mass detaining of the protesters. Like, over hundreds of people were being detained over there, and just me and my colleague were reporting. And since that was like an unexpected protest, and I was very close to the protest, I didn't have time to get to office and get my mass media jacket. But I was holding my camera and my press ID together and explaining the riot police that I'm a journalist. They approached me for like a couple of times, and when I said that I explained that I'm a journalist, they would let me go and went further detaining others. But in the end, they detained me anyway. My press ID didn't work.
And then you carried on filming from the back of the police van.
Yeah, I went. So the reason they detained me, they were aware that I was a journalist, but they didn't want to be reported from that place, because in that radius, the internet was off that day. Internet was blocked locally, and I just was shooting to my camera. But when the policeman moved away from that place, the internet came back, and I decided to go live on Facebook, and I did it. And I was interviewing other people who were detained along with me.
You do have a death wish there, Darkhan.
Yeah, it irritated the police as well.
I can imagine. Tell us a little bit about those interviews. What were the people telling you?
They said that they were just occasional people. They were returning home. Like, you know, when there was I said, hundreds of people protesting in a place that was called like taxi driver's place. And when the police tried to detain them, they run into the houses, like residential houses. And there were people returning from home, from work, or just going somewhere, and they detained them all. They didn't identify whether they were protesters or not. And they were occasional people. One man, it was like 15-year-old boy said, "No, I attended the protest, so I can confirm that." Like, he didn't try to say that, like, you know, he's not a protester as well. The different people were there in police van, but yeah.
No, I mean, it's kind of an extraordinary story, because it's both kind of a very high-tech and low-tech environment, where you can switch off the internet and still carry on getting the story out via mobile phones, and a kind of and kind of oddly, you know, Kazakhstan is the second largest miner of Bitcoin outside the United States. So in the you know, the Bitcoin hash rate, which is how you measure the computing power of machines plugged into the network, dropped by over 10% after the internet was shut off. And this is kind of an extraordinary impact of what's going on, you know, in Kazakhstan. Can we, Matt, if you're ready, could we show a little bit of footage from January the 5th, which is the day after Darkhan's arrest when you're back to covering the protest. I think it's worth showing what can be done with kind of mobile phone equipment, basically.
Мен журналистім көрсеттім, құжаттарымды көрсеттім, құжаттарымды көрсеттім.
А вот в жизни как, видите? В Конституции красиво.
Мен журналист жұмысыма кедергі жасаватсыздар ғой. Мен журналист жұмысыма кедергі жасаватсыздар жігіттер. Ештеңе кедергі жасамайды. Мінекей алып кетіп бара жатыр.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I mean, it's a kind of, it's both incredibly vivid and you can see that it's a very confusing scenario. Can you tell us a little bit what we were seeing there?
It was on January 3rd, so the day when I had to report myself.
Got you.
And yeah, the police approached me and asked which media outlet I represent. When I said like Airfario's Kazakh service, they said okay, and they go away. They went away, and just to return after 5 to 10 minutes to detain the protesters, and 3 police officers just blocked me. They surrounded and blocked me, and so I raised my hand so that to film the detention, but they blocked my camera with their hand. So I'm saying on the video that I've showed you my documents. I'm a journalist. You are interfering with my work. And they said, no, we are not interfering, but like still blocking me. So I ran away for a while, but like, and then the policeman went away. So that's what I could to show.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks very much, Darkhan. I'm going to switch now to the journalist fellows in the room who have questions. And I'll start with Shaprova. I'll just wait for a few moments for the camera to get set up. There we go. New equipment whizzing round slowly.
Where are you, Shaprova?
There she is. Hi, Shaprova.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, and I can repeat the question if it's not audible.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm Shaprova. I'm from Bangladesh. I just wanted to ask, in that sort of situation, obviously you're putting yourself at risk, but there's also a risk to protesters, especially in states where there's quite a lot of surveillance, and maybe in the heat of the moment, people are videoed by you or interviewed by you. Are there any essential rules to keep in mind when doing this sort of reporting to kind of protect the protesters? Do you ask for consent, or are they able to kind of give it or take it away in that moment?
I'll just repeat that. It's a good question. During the protests, you're putting yourself at risk, but also the people you're videoing are kind of at risk of being harassed further. Are there any rules or kind of considerations you follow to keep both yourself but also your interviews safe in that time? Are there guidelines you follow?
So it was a public place and it was a public event, like mass protest, and so we assume that if a person comes to join the protest and they're at least ready to be filmed or to be shot to the camera. And during all the protests, even if they're authorized or not authorized, there are many police officers that are filming the protesters. So that's not only media outlets who are just filming them. But when we approach people, we ask like questions, and there are some, like, if they are not ready to talk, they would just turn away and say that they are not going to give an interview. So yeah, that's how we deal with that question. But like, again, it's like we're not talking to the people in their house, or it's not a private event, it's a public event, it's going on the street. So we assume that the decision to attend that event is also a consent to be seen on cameras.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And I'll go to Robin, going back to the question of internet blackouts.
Hello, I hope you can hear me. I don't think you can actually see me. I wanted to ask the issue that you had with internet blackouts. That's the kind of thing that's happening in a lot of countries now, in different parts of the world. And obviously you were a little bit unprepared for that going in because it was a bit unexpected. Is it, with the benefit of your experience now, is there anything that you think other journalists in other countries where this is happening, is there anything that they can do to prepare for that in the future?
Yeah. This time, Telegram, social network it's called Telegram, worked very well, proved very well, especially during the protest, because in order to publish a story on a website, you have to go through the process of just you first interview people and then write down and edit them, even if it is an article or a video. So in that kind of situation, the time, the shortness of the content is a key to reporting. And you cannot, if there is a total internet blackout, you cannot publish video stories, you cannot publish long stories. You can just give short stories on the social media like Telegram. And the Telegram was almost the only source of information from those days, because those who were good at using Telegram, I mean media outlets, they were sending the news messages consisting of a couple of sentences, and they were just very successful in informing people. But I can, and if the phone connection works, it's always good to have someone from abroad to have access to your sources, like the website or social media accounts. Like you could just, if the internet is not working, you could call by your cell phone connection. You can call your cell phone to someone from abroad to update your pages on social network or to your website. That's what we understood from those events. Like all the media who somehow managed to report on those days had someone abroad those days. If you're just totally like in one country, if you have no one to report from abroad, like you have no tools to report, because the internet, everything is connected to internet, like your social media, your website, like you have no way to report because the internet there is blocked. So yeah.
Thank you. And related to that, I'm going to go to Hannah for a question, because I've got a related question about verifying information. But did you ask your question, Hannah, and then I'll follow up?
Yeah, I was wondering. Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm from Norway. I was wondering how you were able, in a situation where there was both an internet blackout and you had legitimate fears of being arrested while in the streets, how were you able to get sort of the bird's eye view of the situation, what was happening on a national, international level? And were you able to access official sources at all to compare and contrast their stories with what you were seeing and reporting from the streets?
Yeah, during those days, there was a monopoly from the state to inform people. So that was another challenge, because the only source of information from on those days were the state TV channel called 24KZ. And the interesting thing is that, like, these days many people heavily rely on the internet, and they just don't have the TV, or if they have TV, it was like somehow like internet connected. They don't use the conventional like cables. So like we were, but luckily I had access to the state TV's TV channel, and we were just hearing the official version of stories. And since we had an experience from such kind of events in the past, we were just skeptical. We were just asking questions, because like the president said like 20,000 terrorists, and we were sure that it would be very difficult to prove that they were 20,000 terrorists. Like, but there are other people who had no alternative source of information and who had to accept that point of view. That was the only the official source. But the state agencies were reluctant to answer our questions. They were not answering us. When you in Kazakhstan, when you usually call the press secretary of a state agency, they first ask which media outlet you represent. If you say RFL's Kazakh service, and the chances are very high that you wouldn't get any answer, because we are treated very specially in Kazakhstan. But if you represent a state TV, they would give you some comments. So, I mean, I'm not sure it's all the time, but it's most of the time. We are very struggling to get official answer. And during those days, we were not able to ask to get comments from the government agencies. They were just releasing press releases. They were just publishing press releases or talking to state TVs. It was a government's monopoly to inform people those days. I'm not sure if I answered the question.
It does actually. I think it's kind of an incredibly difficult information space to report from, where you can literally see what's happening around you, but you can't kind of get the bigger picture. I'll go to Morten in a moment, but before I do, can I just stay on this and ask a bit more about misinformation? Because we're in a classic case here with essentially misinformation coming from the top. If the government official sources are feeding you a line that you suspect isn't correct, then it's a problem. But how else were you able to kind of verify what you were seeing on Telegram? And you must have been bombarded with these short mobile phone clips from people. Were you only using what you got from your own reporters?
So we didn't. So we couldn't verify a lot of things that the government were saying those days. We just kept reporting on what we saw with our own eyes. Like we had our correspondents in many regions throughout Kazakhstan. We just were calling them. They would go to the squares or to the protests, and they would tell us what they had seen with their own eyes. So we would just report what we've seen with ourselves. And whenever there was a report coming from the government, we were saying that the authorities saying this, and we have no alternative source of information to either confirm or to denounce that statement. We were just always giving disclaimer. So that's only information that comes from the government, and we have no way to verify that news. Just it's the decision on you, the reader or viewer, to decide whether it's true. But what we see this, what the government says this, but we were not able to verify that. Like that was the solution we were using. And one more detail to the reporting under the internet blockage. So we were calling our relatives, friends, and all people we know who were living in different districts of the city. Like while I was in the capital, I was calling my friends, the people I know in Almaty, like asking what you are seeing, what you are hearing, and where are you now? And we were collecting that kind of information. Like we started doing very rudimentary job to collect information under the total blackout.
It kind of literally look out the window and see tell us what you see.
Yeah, exactly. Like some people were saying, like I hear firings, I hear bombs, or someone would say like, in our district everything is calm. I'm not hearing anything, something like that. And we would make our own like virtual map of the city, but of course we wouldn't publish it, but just for our internal use. That's one solution to exploit in those days.
It's really interesting. Thank you, Morten.
Dave.
Okay. Hi, I'm Morten from Denmark. I have a question for you. Doing this sort of frontline reporting and being detained by authorities, what is the most important learning that you take away from this experience when it comes to freedom of the press and mass protests?
I'll just repeat that question in case it wasn't audible completely. What's the most important learning you take away from this experience when it comes to freedom of the press and mass protests?
So authoritarian regimes always try to hide their truth. That's not the new thing to me. we were just expecting, we are always ready to that kind of situation, and it's always good to prepare for that kind of situation in terms of law. Like they would interrogate me, and I would say like I wouldn't answer that question. I need to talk to my lawyer. Like that was the very crucial thing, and they just gave up, and they said like, okay, go away, you can go now. Like we are not charging anything. Like they were asking why you did this, why you are not like wearing the journalist jacket. I was explaining, and I said like when the question was tricky, I would say like I need to discuss my lawyer. Like that was a thing that irritated them, but they felt very like hopeless in trying to get me to say some words to use it against me. But there was another thing. I had a feeling that I was treated especially, and I enjoyed privilege that others couldn't enjoy, because I was representing the international media outlet and detaining the correspondents of international mass media means that even if it's not the international scandal, it's international awareness, and they try to be very careful. And when I was at police station, I was like feeling that, oh, like from their eyes, from their just movement, like it's him, or that's a journalist, or something like that. Like everyone, when I was walking through the hall, like everyone was referring to me. I was feeling that, and 4 hours I was detained. I was sitting in a comfortable room with the police officers, while the detainees were in just one small room. There was no like fresh air to breathe, or they were treated very differently. And I felt like a bit ashamed that because I was representing like international media, I was treated like more or less normal. But I was asking myself, like, what would be if I was representing a local media? Like, I would be treated very badly. I would get hurt. That was like, number one point I get from that detainment. Like, it's very pity to think that Kazakh journalists, Kazakh protesters had to go through those difficult process, like beating ups or just, arbitrary detention. Even if I'm telling that, even if I was detained, I was confident that I would be treated, politely by the police, and they did, because I represented our fellow Kazakh service.
If I just kind of follow up from that point, thank you, Morten, for the very important question as well. If I follow up from that, what do Kazakh journalists need now from the international community to kind of enable them to carry on reporting?
Awareness, more awareness. If there is awareness, then the government, try to compromise, and they treat. If the international media outlets are writing about you, so the government, the authorities, just step back and try to reconsider their decision. It's very hard pressure on our government. So right now we are in the orbit of Russia, people say, but we are the country where still we are not too confident as Kremlin to be brazen about our internal decisions. Like we feel the pressure, our authorities feel the pressure from abroad. And the Kazakh journalists, I think, would be happy for just more international awareness. That would be great help to Kazakh journalists.
That's a really good point, thank you, and we'll do what we can. I'm going to go to Emily, who's from Hong Kong, so understands the situation all too well. Emily, feel free to either ask your question or any other question that you've thought of since. Hi, here at the back.
Hi, Emily.
That way. There we go.
Hi, I'm Emily from Hong Kong. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
As a Hong Kong journalist, I'm very concerned about your country situations. But is it okay for us to just like a Chinese-looking journalist to go to your country to cover the protest? Because from my experience, 10 years before, I go to Xinjiang and then cover the conflict between Uyghurs and Han Chinese, and then those Han Chinese just those Uyghurs just don't trust me, even I'm come from Hong Kong. They just think that, oh, you belong to the Chinese side, and then is it the similar situations now in your country? Because I know that even China not so active to support your country like Austria, but they also support your country. How your people think about China?
So I think the two questions were, would it be safe for someone who looks like Emily to come and report? Because when she went to Xinjiang to cover the conflict between the Uyghurs and the Han Chinese, she felt a huge amount of mistrust with amongst the Uyghurs. They just don't trust Chinese reporters. And then the next thing is, you know, the role China is playing at the moment, and whether it's helping the government essentially kind of repress both protests and media.
That's a very interesting question. But it's hard to tell me to speak on behalf of Uyghurs in Kazakhstan. Perhaps they would suspect, but I don't think that they would be very hostile to you if you visit Kazakhstan. It depends on the knowledge of local people. If they are informed that Hong Kong is not Hong Kong enjoys the media freedom, and it's not the same as it's in China, perhaps they would talk to you without any problem. But like if you are visiting Kazakhstan and if you speak Russian very well, like people wouldn't think that you are Chinese, you know, because Kazakhs are Asiatic in their appearance, like, you know, it depends. I mean, if you're fluent speaker of Russian or Kazakh, that completely changes your interaction with Uyghurs. Like if you say that you are a Chinese journalist but came from Hong Kong, perhaps they would be like, you know, they'd be suspecting, or they would be like, you know, reluctant to talk to you. But I don't think that they would be very hostile to you.
Thank you. I mean, I'm going to ask a question from Paula, who I think is not in the room, if that's correct. Oh, is she in the room? You are in the room. Hi, sorry. Hi, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, Darkhan. Thanks for sharing all this with us. I would like to ask you about something that you mentioned, and it was the how the media's reputation affected the reaction of the demonstrators to the press. You know, like they sort of identify you as a trustful journalist, so they treat you in a different way than the way they were treating other journalists that they perceive in a different way. So my question is, if you could tell us more about how those reputations are built, which are the most important aspects of that reputation. And I would like to know also, how do you maintain, I guess, objectivity or impartiality is a key aspect. And how do you maintain that when there's also, you know, there's a government trying to install this binary discussion logic, you know, like of good and bad, violence and peaceful demonstrators, which is what you know, governments tend to do in this situation.
Thanks, Paula. Really, really important question, and especially coming from Chile. Just to repeat it, it's you talk about the media's reputation affecting the reaction of the demonstrators. How do you build that reputation? How do you maintain it? You know, how is it built? And then what are the most important aspects? And how do you maintain the reputation and objectivity when the government is trying to create a kind of binary logic of good and bad, peaceful versus violent protesters, traitors versus patriots? You know, what do you do in this space?
I would say that it's not as hard for us to make a good reputation because, as I said before, there are very, very few independent news outlets in Kazakhstan. And even if they are not as resourceful as Referrals Kazakh service. You can name them by your just fingers on your one hand. And so if you just tell the truth, just for going to the protest, unauthorized protest brings you like super reputation, you know, because the vast majority of the media outlets usually ignore those protests. So I would say that it's not that difficult to get a good reputation of in Kazakhstan if you're a true independent news outlet. Like you just cover, you just do your work, and you got your reputation. That's not a problem. But you are right. On those days during the violent clashes in Almaty, the protesters burned down the offices of state TVs and the TVs that they saw a propagandist and like three TV channels offices, I guess, were burned down. So yeah, that's the only thing I could say right now. And what was the second question?
You kind of addressed it. It's like how do you operate when there's kind of a narrative being created of kind of good versus bad?
Yeah, we try to verify or just fact check all the government statements. We have a service called like fact check. We do fact check all the statements if they're wrong, and then if there is a very like a great statement or just very loud statement from the government, we analyze the statement, or we try to provide the opinions of analysts or political scientists of what they think about those statements. And usually, like knowledge experts are very skeptical about the statements, and we provide the other side. That's the way how we deal with the government's point of view, with the government's way to control the narrative. And I would say that our authorities are not good at shaping the narrative of public policy in Kazakhstan. Perhaps we have time for that.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks for the question, Paula. Can we talk a little bit about data collection? Because I think this is really interesting. There is an absence of reliable information over what's going on, and you have done what so many journalists try to do, which is gather your own. And I think you've been collating a list of people killed during the January protests.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about that project, how it came about, how you're verifying that list, where you get your data from?
Yeah. So from the very like beginning of the aftermath, the main question was how many people were killed to this. And the human rights defenders started their own list right away, and we catch them up a couple of days later. And they were just reports from different sources. People were just sharing their stories on social media or on media outlets. We started collecting. We created our Excel database and just threw into the database everything we collected on open sources. It was very chaotic, and at the beginning, like we had new names but didn't have like the birth date or didn't have the day of death, but like we were collecting, and then it came to into a system later on. And the way how we prove it, like the first part of the list, on the first days, they were like it was an unverified list, but we decided to publish them anyway because we posted the list with a disclaimer saying that we might be wrong. Please correct us if we are wrong. So then, like we were just fulfilling two tasks. First, when we posted that list, we were doing two tasks. Like first, we were just improving the quality of the old list. People were saying, "Oh, you had my relative on your list, but you lack his birth date, or you are wrong in stating that he died in that city. He actually died in that city. I'm ready to provide his documents, something else." And there were people who were saying, like, you didn't have my relative in your list, my son or my uncle, so on and so forth. And so we were extending our list, and meanwhile we were improving its quality. And yeah, right now people send us the statement from the medical organizations, I mean, stating how they died, like from the bullet, and they're just other documents. So the list, the people who were into the list later, they are just verified very well. But again, like if someone says that a person A died on those days, we put that on the list without, even if we can't verify, because as I said before, it's important to provoke people to, to call us. If we are wrong, we are ready to accept. And we removed 2 people from the list. They were lost, and then luckily they were found alive. So yeah, that's how we. If we waited and see until all the information verified, we would lost a very precious, valuable time. We need to report right now. We need to talk to people right now, because they are very emotional now. They are ready to talk. If we start calling people after a half year, we didn't do our job.
It's this kind of fundamental look out the window, but also you're the first draft of history, and it needs to get written and edited later.
Yeah, that's okay.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
You might ask like the reason why we are doing that, because everyone is asking why we are doing it. Why, like when we talk to people, we look like an interrogator or the police officers ourselves, and they suspect like, why do you ask that question? And we are saying like the authorities refused to name the people. They said like 225. And we say like, without telling the names, without telling the stories, the mere number 225 doesn't mean anything. It might be it might be something with stones, 225 stones, 225 horses, 200. I mean, you cannot deliver the feeling that 225 people died on those days. It's an official number, but they are not providing any names. And the prosecutor's office, we addressed the prosecutor's office, and they refused to give us the list. And we don't know how many people died from which region. The list is for the entire country. Now we see the picture. How many people died in what cities? What were the ages? What were they doing on those days? That gives a picture of those days, and the government is refusing to provide us with that data.
I mean, you're telling the story. What have you called the list? Is it the Freedom List?
No, it's called. I already explained to Caitlin. It's RFRL's list. RFRL's Kazakh service is in Kazakh called Azatlık, which means freedom.
Yeah.
So it's just and people refer to RFRL's Kazakh service Azatlık Radyosu, in short Azatlık. That's why it became
nomenclature.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go back into the room to Niken from Indonesia. That's okay. Just to go back to, again, practical things that can be done for reporters in this environment.
What?
Hi.
Okay, hi, I'm Niken from Indonesia. I want to ask you about, after everything that happened to you and another journalist during the protest, is there any adjustment or consideration or rules from your office while doing such reporting? In my case in Indonesia, my office gave us like a helmet, Kevlar, also cover all the institute logo for protecting somehow it works for protecting us, because we have to do that report. So what in your...
Thank you for your question. It was the first thing we started considering after the protest, because we haven't seen such a big mass protest in our history, and we were not ready for that. And people were just getting injured or were getting shot to death. And now we are considering to wear helmets if we are going to cover protests, and bulletproof jackets, and the clear signs that we are journalists. Now we are considering that. But like, as I said before, it's the first time we are experiencing such a big event, such big protest, and it happened in entire Kazakhstan. Previously there was a belief that among the analysts that it would hard to organize such protests, or like you did, like you saw in Arab Spring, because there was a large territory. Kazakhstan is ninth largest territory. It's very hard to mobilize people, because as soon as you try to join the protest, you are blocked, because the vast territory, few people. But this time, we saw that almost all regions went protesting. It was like national protest day, and we were not ready for that. Now we are, I think, after that we will be ready, even in terms of our what we would be wearing during those protests. But other than that, we were, of course, we value the security of our journalists, and we were ordered to stay home those days. Yeah, we were very careful when the situation were under not all the control. So our journalists stayed home. We were reporting from house, but then yeah.
Thank you very much, Nikan, for the question. And Darkhan, will you please take care of yourself?
Yeah, thank you.
For our own sake as well. It must have taken a terrible toll on you and also your family, who are suddenly worrying for your physical safety on top of everything else. Are they okay? And have you kind of had to set up, things, processes, so that they know that if you're arrested, they know what to do or where to go?
The situation, the one thing that exacerbated my situation is that my mom was visiting me in the capital. My parents live far away from the capital, like it's 1,500 kilometers away. And she said in December, I'm going to visit you. I said, Mom, it's the end of the year. I would be very busy. My wife would be very busy. Come at the very beginning of January, when we would be enjoying our holidays. And then she came on January 2nd, and she saw what she saw. Like they were on the street, just going around the city, and I wasn't able to report. I mean, I had a very brief time to call my relatives, but I decided to go live and report from the Facebook, and I didn't warn them, and they saw about my detention from the news story from RFR's Kazakh service. And when I was at police station, I wasn't worrying for my detention. I was worrying for my mother. How what was she thinking? What was her feeling? Because she comes in a year, visit me, and she saw this. They were very they were worrying about me joining RFL's Kazakh service, because they know how important, how the authorities treat RFL's Kazakh service. But I would say, I'm an editor, don't worry, reporting from the street is not my usual job. And they said, okay. And then they see this. So I felt very terrible. I felt terrible thinking about them. But I think now they should be okay.
They're okay?
Yeah, I hope so, but they're not telling me anything.
And she'll come and visit you again?
I hope so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Darkhan, thank you so much. It's been an incredible hour, just full of color and insight, and again, a window into an episode this year that we got very little information from abroad, and it's been a real privilege to have you talk to us directly about it. So thank you so much for your time, and we wish you and all your colleagues, both in the international and the Kazakh media, all the very, very best in the coming months ahead as well.
Thank you for paying attention to the situation in Kazakhstan. It's very important, and I'm very open to any journalist from abroad to discuss the situation in Kazakhstan. I'm addressing the fellows. If you are ready, somehow if you end up writing a story about Kazakhstan, feel free to touch me, and I would be happy to assist you in your reporting. And again, I miss Reuters Institute, I miss Oxford, and I cherish my time I spent there. Thank you very much for inviting me to join this session.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks for your questions, guys. And next week we have Dominic Young from Acceti talking about micropayments for news, so kind of shift in gear into media sustainability. But in the meantime, thanks, Darkhan, thanks everyone, and we'll see you next week.